deadly medicines and organized crime, a Japanese scientist named Yoshihiro Sato has been writing fake studies about treating weak bones for 20 years. In the last 10 to 15 years, there was a big problem with special nets that doctors put in older women. All the science about beauty products is so mixed up with advertising that I don't even want to talk about this right now. Evidence-based medicine is the way doctors make choices by looking at numbers from lots of studies. Like any way of doing science, evidence-based medicine isn't perfect, and what it tells us isn't always completely right. Evidence-based medicine is just a way to carefully look at all the information we have and make choices based on what we know, what we find. It tries to give us the most trustworthy medical knowledge it can and follows a very important rule, which is don't hurt people. In this kind of medicine, if we are not sure a treatment works, we think it probably doesn't work or might even hurt people until we can prove that it helps. So doctors slowly learned that they needed to test medicines on random groups of people to see if they really worked. So these tests are called clinical trials. These trials are a new way of using an old idea about studying things by changing just one thing at a time. If we do the same things over and over, we usually get similar results, except for small random differences. So if we change one thing about what we are doing and get different results, we can think that the different results happened because of this thing we changed. So this is basically how clinical trials work. So in clinical trials, doctors take groups of patients who are very similar and change just one thing about how they treat these patients. And if the patients get better in different ways, it makes sense to think that the different results are caused because of the new treatment. This is a very simple idea, and they add some math to figure out if the differences they see are big enough to matter. So math helps us understand when differences are normal and when they are special. So if you eat 600 grams of food today and 800 grams tomorrow, you probably wouldn't really notice. Why? Well, because it's normal. But if you will eat like 3 kilograms one day, you would definitely notice. So it's the same in science. Some differences are just normal and others are really important. And math helps us to figure out which differences are really special compared to normal changes. This math is part of almost every study and every paper doctors write about medicine. And there is also something called meta-analysis. This is another way of using math to look at lots of studies together. First, someone gathers all the good information they can find about one question from all over the world. Then they pull it all together and they want to find out how well a medicine or treatment works in general. Does it help 6% of people or 16 or 36%? So different studies find different answers, and that's where meta-analysis helps. People started using this about 50 years ago, and they've made it much better since then. So these days, some people think we should do pure big reviews and meta-analysis because for many questions we don't have enough good information to put together. But this work is still very important because it helps to find fake studies. So a regular doctor reading one paper at a time can tell if someone made up information or if they are reading about the same study twice. But when someone looks at all the studies together carefully, they can find those fake papers. Sometimes when people try to do the same study again, they get very different results. Too different to be just a chance. And this usually happens because they did the study in slightly different ways. So here is an example. In 2013, there was a company called Novartis, and they made a new medicine for heart failure. So heart failure happens when your heart doesn't pump blood well enough, which makes parts of your body swell up with the water. And this can be pretty dangerous. So doctors had been looking for medicines to help heart failure for a long time. And for many years, they used the medicine like this one, which comes from a plant called foxglove. And by the end of the 1900s, they found out that this medicine did some things better, and people who didn't take it actually live longer than people who did. Doctors didn't know this for a long time because they usually only saw what happened to patients right away, not what happened after some months or years later. And this shows how studies can give different results. depending on how long doctors watch their patients. And later they made a new medicine for heart failure that was supposed to work in a different way. It was meant to be used along with other medicines. So here's how they tested it. They took the old medicine, added their new medicine to it, and compared this mix with another medicine. So they found that the mix works better than initial medicine alone. And some doctors were very excited about the new medicine and started using it like a lot. But other scientists noticed a problem with how they tested it. They said it would have been better to compare Dixogen plus serelaxin with just Dixogen by itself. That way, any differences they saw would have been because of new medicine. And Novartis said that they didn't need to do this kind of test, and the scientists who worked for them explained why they thought it wasn't needed. But finally, in 2019, they did the test the way other scientists suggested. And guess what? They found out that serelaxin didn't actually help more than just using the old medicine. But they still sell the medicine combination, and many people buy it. Also, sometimes people make up fake studies. We don't know how often this happens. There are some very big examples of fake studies. For instance, there was a professor named Alison Avenel from University of Aberdeen. So found out that this Japanese scientist named Yoshihiro Sato has been writing fake studies about treating weak bones for 20 years. So his fake studies were very important. Other scientists used his results to plan their own studies and tests, like with thousands of people. All of his work was wasted because it was based on made-up information. This was like a huge special case that was found because Professor Ellison is very good at looking at lots of studies together, and this was one of the biggest things she discovered. Medicines that have really bad side effects usually get stopped before they're tested on people, and usually only medicines with less common or less serious side effects made it to the big tests on people. So in this big test, like called phase 3 clinical trials, doctors expect that the good things about the medicine will be more important than bad things. So for example, if they test medicine on 500 people and see good results, but the bad effects are so rare that they don't show up in just 500 people, they might think there are no bad effects. But when thousands of people start taking the medicine, the bad effects become easier to see. Sometimes bad effects don't show up in tests because the tests only look at what happens right away. For example, if a medicine is supposed to stop bleeding after surgery, doctors will likely study it during the time when bleeding might happen, usually a week or two after surgery. The medicine might make people die later on, but nobody would notice this until they do another longer study or look at what happens to those patients over 1 or 2 years. And there are many examples of medicine that did what they were supposed to do right away, but then caused problems later. I think there are probably many more examples than we know about. Some medicines have bad effects that we only found out about like 50 years after doctors started using them. For instance, there is a medicine called aprocitentan that helps stop bleeding, but later doctors found out it makes more people die from heart problems. And that's why they don't use it in the United States, but in Europe, they think this risk isn't too big. So they still use this medicine. Doctors find out about the side effects in different ways. Sometimes doctors notice them and think someone should study the problem more carefully. Sometimes groups of patients talk about the problem for a long time until doctors start paying attention. And sometimes scientists decide to study these problems on their own. In the last 10 to 15 years, there was a big problem with special nets that doctors put in older women to help with bladder problems. It seemed simple. The doctor would put in something to hold up the tube that carries pee, and it helped. But then the area would get swollen and painful, and hard scar tissue would grow. So people fought for many years to stop doctors from using these nets. Now, some countries have special doctors' offices where very good doctors do difficult operations to take out these nets. One of the most famous people in evidence-based medicine today, Peter Ghosh, has spent the last probably 15 to 20 years telling people that antidepressant medicines not only don't work but actually hurt patients. In 2013 and 2015, he wrote books called Deadly Medicines and Organized Crime, How Big Pharma Has Corrupted Healthcare, and Deadly Psychiatry and Organized Denial. These books talk a lot about how companies push doctors to use antidepressants. Peter isn't just some doctor or scientist talking about things he doesn't know about. His whole life shows that he's better at working with and understanding medical information than most other experts. I personally don't know a lot about this specific topic, but there are big questions about whether psychiatrists are right when they talk about picking the right antidepressants and making them work well. The psychiatrist might be wrong and giving patients wrong information. Since psychiatrists and especially psychologists spend a lot of time trying to change how patients think and feel, their wrong ideas might affect their patients too. So just because doctors and patients get along well, doesn't mean the medicines the doctors give actually work. The problem with whether antidepressants work and are safe has been going on for a long time. There are many medicines that might not work. For example, some popular medicines in Europe that are supposed to help your immune system. Nobody has proven these medicines work in good studies. Companies that make beauty products use people's trust and science to sell things. They often write the word proven next to what they say the product will do and put a little star. Then at the bottom they say that these results just come from asking about 20 people what they thought about the product. All the science about beauty products is so mixed up with advertising that I don't even want to talk about this right now. But this information isn't scientific and isn't checked by other scientists before it's shared. Most beauty products are just basic things that people think are amazing and pay way too much money for. It's very simple. Look at the bottle of shampoo or face cream in your bathroom. You'll see a huge list of things that are supposed to be really good for you. But the trick is it's impossible to study how all these things work together. Doctors and scientists don't do this kind of research. We're lucky if we understand how one ingredient works by itself. Also, there is no proof that shampoos that cost $5 and are made in huge amounts really have things like oils from tropical fruits in them, Sometimes people do find out that beauty products cause problems, and then the companies just quickly stop selling them. But usually they don't need to do this, because these products don't really do anything special at all. On this positive note, I'm Voronkova, and I'll see you in the next video. Please subscribe.